Welcome back to Pokemon episode summaries. Today, I'll be doing episode 308, Abandoned Ship. The episode begins with Ash and the gang finally having left Dewford Island after all these episodes by a speedboat, a public one, basically like a ferry. And they were taking this boat toward their next destination, although they didn't quite know where that was. They knew that May had to go to her first contest, and they knew that Ash had to go to his third gym battle, so Brock looked for where their next destination should be. While this was going on, Ash pulled out his badge case and admired the 2 home gym badges he had, including the knuckle badge that he just earned in the last episode, from the Dewford gym leader, Brawly. Brock then looks at the map in his guidebook and determined that the closest city to them was Slateport, although it didn't have a gym, only a contest hall where a contest was going to take place. Brock then continues to look in the map in his guidebook and finds something known as Marvel City, and Max takes action, reminding Brock that looking at the Pokénav was a lot more efficient than looking at a goddamn map in a guidebook, as he pulls out Marvel City to find out that, much to Ash's amusement, Marvel City was where the third home gym was located. Ash became immensely excited at this, declaring that he couldn't wait for the battle and pleading to go to Mauville before Slateport to get to his third gym battle as soon as possible, but May interrupted him and reminded him about her having her first ever contest in Slateport City, adding that the contests were basically limited time events because the contests were only going on at a certain period of time, whereas the gym could be challenged at any time. So May was like, no, we have to go to Slateport first, and Ash realized this and admitted that, yeah, they should probably go to Slateport first. May then pulled out her Beauty Flies Pokeball and talked about what she hoped to do in the contest with it, hoping to get her first ever ribbon. Meanwhile, we then see that Team Rocket were actually the ones piloting the boat. Oh my god. And unbeknownst to Ash and the gang, they were in boat captain disguises, if you want to call it that, and were currently spying on them instead of driving the boat. And they planned to steal Pikachu, since it appeared like Ash and the gang were the only ones on this goddamn boat. The plan to steal Pikachu started out with Jessie and James merely spying on Ash and the gang, and Jessie laughed as she saw that they were completely unsuspecting of them being the ones who were driving. So they put their plan into action as Jessie and James approached Ash and the gang and gave them some lemonade, free of charge, in addition to some free sandwiches. Brock was surprised by the good taste of the sandwich and how cold the lemonade was, as he commended Jessie and James, not knowing it was them, on their great service, and Jessie and James just appeared even nicer, as they gave Ash's Pikachu a treat as well, which they called their special electric Pokemon food. Pikachu was intrigued by this, so it went to get the food, which Jessie and James had laid out in a bowl on the ship. But as Pikachu took the first bite, James brought a rubber bag down onto him, shocking Ash and the gang, as Pikachu was now captured inside. May obviously came to the conclusion that Team Rocket were not captains, and Team Rocket just laughed, confirming this as they throw off their disguises and do their motto, revealing themselves, and right after this, Meowth and Wobbuffet surface next to the boat in the Magikarp sub, making a big splash and saying his line in the motto as he tells Jessie and James to get in, so they could escape. As Jessie and James go in the Magikarp sub, though, Ash sends out his Corphish, and it uses its pincer to slice the rubber bag open, setting Pikachu free. This angers Jessie, who sends out her Seviper and tells it to use Poison Tail, but Corphish dodges and uses Crab Hammer, knocking Seviper out in one shot. May then sends in her Beauty Fly and has it use a powerful gust to blow Jessie, James, and Seviper into the Magikarp sub, not inside of it, but on top of it, crashing into Meowth and Wobbuffet. And of course, Ash then sends Team Rocket blasting off by having Pikachu use Thunderbolt in the air. And as Team Rocket blasts off, their Magikarp sub explodes, and they complain about the money they wasted on buying the boat and the snacks for the boat that they gave Ash and the gang, basically upset that they wasted the little bit of money that they had to give Ash and the gang some fucking refreshments. With Team Rocket gone, Ash and the gang then noticed that the boat had stopped, and that was because there was no one piloting it anymore since Team Rocket were gone, and the boat appeared to be pedaled by gas. So they went into the captain's quarters as Brock took the wheel to drive it, only to unfortunately find out that the boat was out of gas, and the radio also didn't work, so they couldn't radio for help. Brock tried his best to try and get the boat going, hoping there was maybe some gas reserves, but the engines just whined and wouldn't start up, so everyone sat down outside on the deck, not knowing what to do. Sad that they likely wouldn't make it to Slateport City, ever, let alone in time for the contest. To make matters worse, Ash and the gang were beginning to get hungry, and they didn't think there was any snacks left on board, and they all saw storm clouds form, meaning a huge storm was approaching. Even though the actual storm doesn't arrive, it does cause the waves to get pretty fucking crazy, and it causes the waves to drift the boat to an abandoned ship that was enveloped in dense fog, likely caused by the storm. Because of this fog, it was hard to actually make out that the abandoned ship was an abandoned ship, but Max was able to recognize it, and he was the one who pointed it out to everyone. As they approached the ship, Brock was hesitant to go on because he found it creepy, although the others kind of wanted to go on the boat, as they saw that it was trapped in some large rocks. So if it was stuck, that would likely mean it had less chance of capsizing if the storm ended up going full force. So, without further ado, Ash and the gang decided to explore this seemingly abandoned boat. As they jumped on some of the rocks it was stuck in off their boat, and Brock noticed some rope hanging off the side of the abandoned boat that they could use to scale it and actually climb in. So, they all got in, unharmed, and reached the deck of the boat and started exploring it. And as they did, May started her news reporter personality again that she did during the Mudkip episode, as she pretended to do a fake news show to explain what they were finding on the deck, which was jack shit. Although she was trying to make it sound exciting, claiming that there was a whole bunch of mysteries aboard this abandoned ship, and she was going to be the detective to find them. Brock, Ash, and Max was trying to ignore her because she was not talking to an actual audience, just talking to herself. Brock, trying to ignore her as best he could, explored the deck and came to the conclusion that their assumption that the boat appeared to be abandoned was right. This ship was long abandoned. There was no sign of any life. Suddenly, though, Ash checked the other side off the deck and found a small fishing boat anchored near this one's starboard. So Brock then came to the conclusion, as well as Ash and May, that there had to have been another person nearby, and they'd likely come into this ship by now, since they weren't in their small fishing boat. May gets intrigued by this as she continues her fake reporting, alerting her audience that there may be a mysterious person on board, when suddenly a man who looked relatively young stepped out of a door that led into the rest of the ship onto the deck. This just intensifies May's excitement as she pretends to hold a camera and take a picture of the guy, making a camera in the shape of her hands, and she tells her audience, quote-unquote, that a mysterious man has just approached them, and the man was confused by this, and he simply just introduced himself as Tommy, confirming that he did come to the ship in his fishing boat. The man Tommy asked what Ash and the gang were doing on the ship, leaving Brock to explain the situation, that their boat had ran out of gas and had drifted towards the ship. Tommy gives Ash and the gang his sympathies for their misfortune, and he reveals why he was on the ship, stating that he came to investigate it. Ash and the gang questioned why he wanted to investigate it, leading Tommy to explain the story of the ship. It was once a great ocean liner, but it crashed into the rocks years ago, and it was now abandoned. Further explaining that it was now known as the Forsaken Ship because the Coast Guard decided to leave the ship where it was, since all the passengers, including himself, had safely evacuated after the crash. So there was no reason to waste any money to try and pull the ship back in, since it was already basically damaged beyond repair, and it got stuck among the rocks, so it would take a lot of effort to try and pull it out. He then clarifies that he wanted to investigate the ship because he kind of wanted to see if he could move it to a new place, since it had been stuck here for so long. But his main desire for investigating was because, even though all the human passengers had escaped the ship, he had lost his marshtomp on the ship, and now he hoped to find it after all this time, thinking it might still be in the ship. He then went on and on about how he would do anything to find his marshtomp, and admits that he would have liked to have come and find his marshtomp sooner, but explains that he lost his marshtomp while he was evacuating by dropping its Pokeball in the middle of the water. So he assumed that the Pokeball would have drifted off somewhere farther away from the ship, not towards it, but he had spent literal years looking all around the ocean, and he hadn't found it, so he decided to come back to the abandoned ship in hopes that the marshtomp would still be on there. He then goes on and on about how he used to come to the ship all the time and train with his marshtomp, and he really wanted to be able to do that again. So he hoped to free the ship from the rocks eventually, and also find his Marshtomp. Ash had never heard of Marshtomp before, so he looked it up in his Pokedex to find out that it was the middle stage evolution of Mudkip. Despite Tommy's current predicament, he still felt bad about Ash and the gang's dilemma, so he promised that as soon as he was done searching for his Marshtomp, he would give Ash and the gang a ride to the nearest port in his fishing boat. Ash and the gang thanked him, and he then walked off to try and search. Although before he left, Tommy gave Ash and the gang some lemonade and some food while they wait. So at least Ash and the gang got to enjoy some food and drinks while Tommy searched, because he searched for quite a while, so long that the fog lifted and the sun came out. Ash, May, Brock, and Max were the only ones enjoying food, though, because May had sent out a Torchic to give Pikachu some company, and the two of them were eating some spare Pokemon food that Brock had. Very happy and content, until Torchic notices a nearby door on the ship swing open, and a mysterious face come out from the door and glare at it, and move around slightly. Although, since it was so dark in the room where the thing was in, Torchic couldn't make out what it was, so it eagerly went to go investigate. Rushing inside to be confronted by a huge fucking creature as it panics and screams. Ash and the gang heard these screams, so they ran inside, and May looked around, noticing that Torchic was probably in this room, but she couldn't find Torchic anywhere, much to her dismay. Tommy happened to hear Torchic scream as well, so he rushes inside the room and asks what was wrong, leading May to explain that her Torchic appeared to be missing, leading Tommy to suggest that they all split up and start searching for it immediately. So they do, hoping to cover more ground. Meanwhile, below deck in the stern of the ship, coincidentally, Team Rocket had blasted off inside of the ship, and even though they were passed out when they first landed, they soon woke up, though they moaned immensely as they were in serious pain, although they were bored of just laying there already, so they're like, okay, I guess we should probably look for a way out of this fucking ship. Right as they left the stern and then continued down a hallway, though, it was revealed that the mysterious creature that had encountered Torchic was spying on them from behind a cargo box. As Team Rocket were going down the hallway, Jesse and James were focused on looking forward, though Meowth was focused on looking to his sides, and he was the only one to spot an open door, and he went inside the room all by himself. When suddenly, the mysterious big creature's blue hands reach out and pull Meowth further into the room before he can escape, and he definitely tried to. Jesse and James thought they heard something, which were Meowth's screams, but when they looked back, they didn't see Meowth, and this just made them curious as to what the fuck happened to him, realizing he'd suddenly vanished. Meanwhile, as for Ash and the gang and Tommy, they were having no luck looking for Torchic below deck, and they eventually all reunited with each other in a large room, and they decided to search the large room altogether. As Max called out for Torchic, he passed by a large hole in the floor with water inside, potentially due to the ship flooding a little bit due to the crash. After he initially passed by this flooded hole, though, Max turned his back toward the hole, allowing him to be caught off guard as the creature emerged from the water and pulled Max under, causing him to scream, although it was quickly cut off when he was fully underwater. The scream was loud enough to alert everyone else, though, as they looked at the hole and saw that Max was missing, making May immensely worried, as she didn't know where he went, because no one saw Max actually fall down the hole, so they didn't know that's where he went. Max eventually wakes up, and he finds himself suspended off the floor, next to Torchic and Meowth, who were also suspended off the floor, tied in some sticky substance, like a web of some kind. He notices that Torchic was sad as well, and it starts to cry, and he couldn't blame it because he realized that he was now captured by something, along with Torchic and Meowth. Meanwhile, back with the rest of the gang and Tommy, they continued on searching, now looking for both Torchic and Max, wondering where the fuck they could have went. They all eventually go down a corridor in the ship and find a door shaking up ahead, and they begin to get scared, wondering what was on the other side, when suddenly the door then opens, and a Meryl and two Azrael, completely harmless, happily bounce by, making everyone sigh with relief that that's all that was on the other side. The two Azurill and the Meryl then walk by, or rather bounce by, Ash and the gang and Tommy without paying them any attention, as Brock speculates that the ship must have been the two Azurill and the Meryl's home, with May and Tommy suggesting that there were probably way more water Pokemon in the ship as well, since the ship had crashed in water, and water Pokemon were probably intrigued by it. Meanwhile, back with Max, Meowth, and Torchic, Max was struggling in the web that he was trapped in, trying to escape, to no avail. Meowth was annoyed by Max's useless struggling, so he told him to stop, claiming that he already tried to escape his own web, and if he couldn't do it, there was no way Max could. This leads to an argument between Max and Meowth, with Max believing that he could escape, and Meowth believing otherwise. Just then, Max gets an idea, as he tells Meowth to free them using Fury Swipes. Meowth counters that he couldn't move his arms because they were stuck in the web, leading Max to state that that was no problem, since Meowth could just use his feet claws for Fury Swipe instead, because his feet were free. Meowth still refused to help Max, though, due to Max being his enemy, and Meowth not benefiting at all from freeing Max. However, Max assured Meowth that he would benefit, stating that if Meowth freed him, then once Max was down, he would free Meowth. This promise was enough to convince Meowth to free Max, so he used all of his might to swing himself in the web over to Max, and then slashed Max's web with his feet claws, freeing him. After a little bit of struggle, Max was pleased, and got up from the ground, and immediately went to go free Torchic first, which made Meowth pissed off, because he wanted to be freed first. He thought that was the deal. Just then, a Spinnerack comes up behind Max, and Meowth warns Max, leading Max to wonder what the fuck a Spinnerack was doing on the ship, when it suddenly string shots him, and it ties him back up, and it hangs him from the ceiling once more. Meowth, still bitter at Max for not freeing him first, makes fun of Max's escape attempt, failing, sarcastically stating how Max's plan went very well. Meowth then decides to annoy Max and Torchic as he swings into Torchic to hit it, who then swings into Max, and Max does the same to Torchic to hit it into Meowth. So essentially Torchic was the poor middle Pokemon in the middle of Max's and Meowth's argument as they tried to hit each other with it, to annoy each other. Meanwhile, Jessie and James were walking down one of the ship's hallways looking for Meowth, although they remarked that the ship's hallways looked extremely creepy due to the ship being mostly abandoned. Suddenly, they approach a box in the middle of the hallway and find it shaking, freaking them out even more. Just then, the source of the shaking was revealed to be none other than a Golduck, as it popped out of the box, startling Jessie and James immensely. The Golduck simply pays Jessie and James no attention, though, as it walks away, making Jessie angry, because, she was mad at it for scaring her and shit, and she felt like Golduck wasn't taking responsibility for this and just walking away from the situation. So she screamed at it, but the Golduck just continued to walk ahead. Although, it then turns around and goes back the other way, and Jessie follows it, going in the same direction, and James tries to follow, but then he is pulled back by the same blue hands that had pulled back Max and Torchic and Meowth. James tries to call for Jessie before he was pulled away, but his screams were muffled, since he could barely even fucking scream because of how scared he was of the blue hands, and therefore his screams go unheard by Jessie because she was already too far away as well. Having turned the corner to go after Golduck, with no one to help him, James then passes out as he soon finds himself in the same predicament as Meowth, Torchic, and Max, being tied to the ceiling with a web. Meowth jokingly makes fun of James for getting in the same situation as them, leading James to get mad at Meowth as he orders Meowth to cut him the fuck down. Meowth laughs at James' anger, just trying to find some amusement, as he began to swing toward him to cut him down. But Max interrupts, stating his belief that even if he was able to cut James down, James would just end up getting put back up like he was, though argues that Meowth should free him because he now thought of a way to counter the Spinnerack if it came back, even though he was lying. Meowth knew he was lying, so he ignored Max's pleas for him to let him down, making Max angry, as he didn't want James to be let down, but not him. So he swung himself into James, who was beside Torchic, who was beside Meowth. So this caused everyone to go ramming into each other, as they all screamed in annoyance, due to both the pain of running into each other, and also because Meowth and James were annoyed because James couldn't get freed. Meanwhile, what remained of Ash and the gang, as well as Tommy, were walking down another hallway, searching for Max and Torchic, when suddenly May was pulled underwater, because she had passed by yet another water-filled hole in the ship. Since Brock, Tommy, and Ash were able to actually see May get pulled into the water this time, although they didn't see what pulled her in, they knew that she must have been in the water, so Brock sent out his mudkip to go into the water to find her, but it reported back that it couldn't find May, and it was gone. Or she was gone, rather. Knowing this for a fact, after only doing a few seconds search. Seeing everyone being picked off made Brock come to the conclusion that they all seemed to be getting picked off one by one, and he, Ash, and Tommy debated what they were going to do to avoid getting pulled in, with Tommy confirming Brock's theory, stating that there must have been something pulling people away, since it didn't like all the people on the ship. Meanwhile, as you probably would expect by now, May was in the same predicament as James, Max, Meowth, and Torchic, being directly beside James in a web. Upon seeing May captured, James and Meowth begin to tease May at being so incompetent that she was fucking captured, but May points out that James and Meowth were captured as well. May then gets stressed out, wondering how the fuck she was going to get down from the web, but Max comforts her, assuring her that Brock, Tommy, and Ash were probably searching for them, and stating that they had 3 people searching for them, whereas the losers, James and Meowth, only had 1 person searching for them, Jessie. Meowth and James rebut, though, that all they needed was Jessie searching for them, as Jessie would be strong enough alone to defeat whatever creature had captured them, confident that Jessie would come to their rescue. However, Max and May continued to state their doubt at this, which pissed Meowth and James off so much that they started to laugh, joking that they actually hoped that Jessie would get captured so that she could beat May and Max's asses for the insults they were throwing. As for Torchic, it was just sitting there, trying to not get involved in any of the arguing. We then see Jessie, who was now walking down a different hallway, noticing that James was gone by this point, so she decided to give up her chase of the Golduck and instead go searching for Meowth and James because she was scared of being alone. Eventually, Jessie had walked for so long that she was beginning to get very tired, although she soon jolted awake, freaking out as she heard a noise in front of her. But she calmed down when she realized that this noise was just a Wooper who happily walked by her, although she wasn't happy with the Wooper by any means, as she yelled at it, demanding that it not scare her like it just did. Just as Jessie finally calms down a little bit, the mysterious creature appeared behind her, and she screams as she notices the creature, and she gets pulled away, though not into water, since there was no water nearby. But eventually, she passes out from the shock, as did everyone else when they were pulled, and she now finds herself, of course, tied up in web with James, Max, May, Torchic, and Meowth. Somewhat disappointing James and Meowth, because although they wanted Jessie to help argue against Max and May, they, of course, wanted Jessie to save them as well, and now she couldn't. May and Max then make fun of Jessie for being captured like them. However, Jessie was in no mood for their insults. So, she slams into Max and May, who slam into Torchic, James, and Meowth in the process. As a result, Meowth goes swinging far away to his side that he was on, but then he swings back to the other side and smashes into everyone again, which just causes even more swinging, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, pissing everyone off, as Jessie's Wobbuffet then forcibly comes out of its Pokeball. But immediately upon leaving the Pokeball, it gets tied up in a web as well. Likely because the Spinnerack saw it right when it popped out, but Jessie didn't realize this, so she just angrily yelled at Wobbuffet, telling it that it was so useless and wasn't good for anything, because it couldn't even fucking avoid being captured for 1 second. Meanwhile, Ash, Brock, and Tommy were still looking for their lost friends, as suddenly, the blue hand reached out from another hole filled with water, this time looking to grab Pikachu. However, Pikachu noticed before it was grabbed, and was able to attack the blue hands with a Thunderbolt, which got Ash, Tommy, and Brock's attention, so they saw the hand as well. Ash, Brock, and Tommy and Pikachu see more than just the blue hand, though, as the Thunderbolt causes the creature to leap out from the water in pain, revealing it to be a Pokemon which Brock recognized, a Swampert. Ash didn't know what a Swampert was, as he had never seen one before, so he scans it with his Pokedex to learn that Swampert was the final evolution of Mudkip and the direct evolution of Marshtomp. This was why Tommy gasped upon seeing the Swampert, as he knew that it was likely his Marshtomp who had evolved. This was implied to be the case, as we then see the Swampert angrily glare at Tommy, and then it quickly turns and rounds a corner, running down a hall, as Ash, Brock, and Tommy followed. Well, they followed as best they could, until it disappeared when it leaped into another hole filled with water. Ash, Brock, and Tommy simply stood there, wondering whether to dive in after it or not, allowing the Swampert to get way ahead of them. But regardless of this, Tommy realized that he had to go after his Marshtomp, now a Swampert, and he pleaded for Ash and Brock to go with him, and they obliged, as Brock of course let Mudkip come with as well, as it led the way, knowing its way through water the best. Ash, Brock, and Tommy even gave it a head start, because they knew it would do way better in the water than them, and they dove in shortly after Mudkip. Anyways, after some swimming, they surfaced on the other side of the ship, in another hallway. Just then, Mudkip was the first one to notice an open door, so Ash, Brock, and Tommy and Mudkip come out of the water, and they go inside the door, only to find the room where Jessie, James, Max, May, Torchic, Meowth, and Wobbuffet were tied up, with Swampert standing in front of them, thus confirming that Swampert was the culprit. May then bags for Ash, Brock, and Tommy to help get her, Torchic, and Max down, and Team Rocket bags that they do the same for them, even though they were enemies. Brock decided to save Team Rocket as well, because, he was just kind like that, and he told Mudkip to prepare to fire a water gun to free everyone and break the webs, leading Swampert to motion to Spinnerack to get ready to replace the webs if necessary, as Swampert interferes, preventing Mudkip from even using the water gun anyways, as he uses a mud shot on it. This injured Mudkip quite a bit, so Brock didn't know what to do, but thankfully Ash refused to give up, as he decided to send in his Corphish to attack Swampert with Crabhammer, but Swampert dodged the attack and knocked Corphish out in a single hit with its Iron Tail. Tommy was surprised at the fact that what he believed to be his, now Swampert, had used Iron Tail, since although he had taught his Mudkip Iron Tail, it was never that strong before. It appeared stronger than it ever had been. But he quickly snapped out of his amazement when he heard Ash order Pikachu to attack Swampert, as Ash recalled Corphish, and requested that Ash not attack the Swampert, explaining that he knew that it was his that must have evolved from his Marshtomp, explaining that he knew for a fact, since he raised this now Swampert, since it was a Mudkip, so he could tell if the Swampert was actually his, and he knew for a fact it was. So, basically, he was asking Ash to let him deal with his own Swampert, and Ash obliged, as he backed away, as did Brock. and Tommy stepped up to his Swampert and tried to reintroduce himself, explaining that it was its trainer, Tommy, and he says hello. But Swampert angrily responded with Mudshot. However, Tommy wasn't even fazed by this Mudshot, and didn't give up on trying to talk to his Swampert, as the attack had just made him more motivated to, when he realized, telling the Swampert that he realized this, that the Swampert was angry because it felt like it was abandoned as a Marshtomp, and therefore it had since grown to hate Tommy and humans in general. Jessie was getting bored at Tommy just talking to his Swampert, so she demanded that someone help him get out again, but Tommy just ignored her, as he tries to explain to his Swampert through Swampert's threatening loud growls that he never meant to abandon it, explaining that when the ship crashed, everyone had to evacuate. And during the rush of the evacuation, he accidentally dropped Swampert's Pokeball, or when it was still a Marshtomp, but you know what I mean. Basically, he was like, look, I intended all well to take you with me when I evacuated, but I just lost your Pokeball. I didn't intend to abandon you. Also explaining that he thought that Marshtomp, now a Swampert, would be completely okay in its Pokeball, so that's why he ran so fast and accidentally dropped it, because he didn't expect something like that could happen. Swampert just roars in response, clearly not believing Tommy at all. And upon hearing this roar, Mudkip stepped up, because, the roar was similar to its own since it was its evolved form, and upon seeing Mudkip, Tommy told Swampert to try and remember when it was a Mudkip like that one, and how they were best friends when it was a Mudkip, as well as a Marshtomp. At first, Swampert doesn't know what the fuck Tommy was talking about, and it just still glares at him angrily, but eventually, upon seeing Mudkip, it has a forced flashback of it as a Mudkip and Tommy as a child, back when they were training together. First, it remembered when it used its first successful water gun to hit over some cans, and Tommy congratulating it. And it remembered it as a Mudkip, and the kid Tommy happily hugging each other as well. He then remembered the time where he evolved from Mudkip into Marshtomp, and then the time that Tommy had taught Marshtomp Irontail to help it destroy a huge rock. The final flashback was of Marshtomp and Tommy hugging, and upon having all these flashbacks, now believes Tommy when he said that he came back to the ship to get Swampert after all this time, and since the former Marshtomp, now Swampert, had calmed down and saw that its old trainer really was telling the truth, it forgave Tommy and hugged him. Tommy hugs it back and tells it was so glad to have it back, and apologizes for leaving it, before asking if they could be a team again, and thankfully for Tommy, Swampert happily agreed. All's well that ends well. Yay! Ash and Brock comment on their amazement that Tommy was able to get through to Swampert, as Ash, Brock, and Tommy, and Swampert then all worked to untie everyone, freeing them, with no threat of being tied back up, since Swampert had obviously told the Spinarak not to, and now Spinarak and Mudkip were kind of becoming friends. May then happily goes up to Torchic and hugs her, immensely glad that they were freed, as Tommy apologizes on Swampert's behalf for all the trouble that it caused with tying everyone up, and Max goes up to Tommy and Swampert and informs them that he really didn't care at all. He was just glad to see such a strong Pokemon, Swampert, and he was glad to see Swampert reunited with Tommy. As for Team Rocket, when they were free, they did some stretches, because, they were so stiff from being captured, but they saw an opportunity, with everyone being caught off guard, with Tommy and his Swampert, to try and steal Swampert and Pikachu. So, to do this, Jessie sent out her Seviper, and had it use Poison Tail on the Swampert, but Swampert simply punches Seviper, not even using a real attack, to knock it directly into Jessie and knock it out, and then Tommy tells Swampert to use Hydro Pump, and it sends Team Rocket blasting off. Damn, that was quick. Anyways, with Team Rocket gone, Ash and the gang and Tommy went back up to the deck of the ship, with Tommy Swampert, of course, and Tommy thanks Ash and the gang for their help, and admits that he learned a lot today. Specifically, that he should have just come to this goddamn ship in the first place, instead of looking in the rest of the sea. And Ash and the gang laugh, as Tommy promises that he would never lose a Pokemon again. He then sees some Wingull on the ship, and he realizes that there was a lot to the world of Pokemon, and he was glad to be able to experience it all with his Swampert again. And he also realizes that there were a lot of water Pokemon now on board the ship, including the Wingull, the Marill, the Azurill, the Golduck, and he didn't want to kick them off or anything, so he planned to set the place up for, like, a rest stop for a whole bunch of water Pokemon on their way to other places. So basically, they would come to the ship, and then maybe they would get driven somewhere on the boat, and then they would hop off. Ash and the gang encouraged Tommy that this was a good idea, along with his other ideas, which was to train for the Home League with his Swampert, and to fix up the abandoned boat, because, it would have to be fixed up if he wanted to make it a home for water Pokemon. He basically just wanted to make it usable again, so that he could go places and also take water Pokemon places. Tommy then remembers that he offered to give Ash and the gang a ride to the nearest port when he found his Swampert, so he reminds Ash and the gang about this, and they request that he actually just take them straight to Slateport City, and he agrees as they set off. The episode then ends with Ash and the gang seeing Slateport City in the distance as they approach it, and May getting super hype for her first contest there, and Ash just hype to leave the goddamn city already, so he could go to get his third hole in gym badge in Mauville City.